Welcome back to Derry Public Radio. Reporting from the basement of the Derry Civic Center, this is CM Alexander with the news. In local news, Clean Clothes Washateria will be reopening after their recent remodel. Owners Todd and Rebecca Clean Clothes would like to thank the community for all their support by sharing a few of the updates made. Machines will now take debit, TVs have been added, and finally, a bank of bloody items only washers. Like their motto says, Clean Clothes Washateria will get out every stain you see and some you can't. You are listening to Derry Public Radio. This is Derry Public Radio.
Welcome back to Derry Public Radio, a bi-weekly Stephen King Book Club podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Joshua Kahn, alongside CM Alexander.
Hello, everyone.
And Benjamin Graham.
Hey, concert readers.
And today we are continuing our reading of It, a Patreon selection from Rachel Jansen, and we are covering chapters 6 through Derry, the second interlude, and we have CM leading our discussion. CM, take it away.
Thanks, Josh. Before we begin...
We aren't covering the second interlude, right?
Yes.
I did not read that.
Oh, no.
Because we said at the end of the last episode we're reading chapters 6 through 9 because I remember saying nice.
Oh, it was in our... I messaged in our chat.
Whoops.
That...
I'll cut that out.
No, just leave it in. Let people know.
The second interlude is about the black spot.
Oh, that sounds really good.
It is really good.
Okay, well, you guys will have to describe it to me. Yeah.
Okay. So quick recap on part 1, we spent the majority of time with our characters as kids. We caught up with them briefly as adults when they all got the call from Mike to return home to Derry as they promised because something terrible is happening again. And we basically got an encounter with it, Pennywise, for most of our main characters. We left off with Bill's brother's photo album coming to life and bleeding. And now we kick things off with another missing kid, Edward Cochran. And this is told through news segments starting 2 days after he disappeared, June 21st, 1958. And in hearing about Eddie's disappearance, we get a list of missing kids that, when laid out like this, is really appalling. And the police chief gives a press conference and basically says, hey guys, don't panic. Even though I know a lot of kids have gone missing, it's not like some one person is stalking our kids. All these deaths or disappearances, it's multiple people, okay? So just chill out.
He says, listen, we get 50 missing kids a year. So chill.
It's too many.
That's an insane number. That's so many.
Ben, what you're forgetting is that some of them are runaways. Like these kids who are 12 years old are definitely running away from home.
For sure.
Yeah.
So Edward is missing. A month before that, his little brother Dorsey died in a, quote, ladder accident. And literally 2 days after Edward was reported missing, the court orders the exhumation of Dorsey. And their stepdad, Richard Macklin, is arrested for Dorsey's murder 2 days after that. And while that makes me really happy, that seems super fast for all of that to happen, which tells me that no one examined the body to corroborate the claim that he fell and it was an accident. And everybody who was investigating this knew that it was bullshit. Kind of more Derry wrongness, I feel like. I could be stretching, but that's just... And we get these interviews later with adults in their lives, like teachers and daycare centers, who noticed the abuse and either just outright ignored it because they didn't want to get fired, or ignored it because they're like, oh, well, I didn't think anything was going on. And it's
one of those where you're exactly right that I feel like it's just Derry being bad. Something spoiled at the heart of this community where something so horrible is just forgotten. They said it last that they have this art of forgetting. Mm-hmm. And this is just one of the many instances we get.
It's kind of a badass way to write this section because it's presented to us as just the normal order of things. So there's no overt hints that it's messed up. And when I read this as a kid, the first time I read it, if you haven't had certain life experiences, you're not picking up on all of these things. You don't realize, you know it's wrong, but you don't realize what the hell?
Yeah.
None of this should have ever happened. So, essentially, this book destroys childhood innocence, and I love it.
Yeah, I'm gonna sound like such a douchebag.
Oh, no.
But now that I have a kid, stuff with kids like this, like it hits me in such a different way. And like you read the things like, Dorsey said Dad had to take me up because I was bad every time. Like he gets his fingers bent back and all this stuff. And it's like even extra disgusting having my like little baby at home and be like, why, how can someone do this to someone?
There are so many instances in this book where I kept thinking to myself, the things that these people are doing are so horrible, and not any of the like murderer characters, just like the things that normal people do, specifically the Cochran's stepdad and Beverly's dad, who we'll get to later, unfortunately, are so unspeakably like awful that I kept wanting to say, wow, this is cartoonishly evil. It's so over the top. No one would ever do this.
So that actually, that makes me really excited because we'll talk about it a little bit later. But one of the things we talked about how Henry Bowers is this insanely over the top monster for how young he is. But as we learn about the people in Derry, it really starts to paint a picture that Henry Bowers is the natural progression of people in Derry, because we get to know some of these adults who are also this unspeakable amount of
just
awful,
cruel and vicious
We're
people.
going to end with a bunch of Henry Bowers characters. So Macklin gets charged with Dorsey's death. He confesses in July, but he says he didn't kill Edward. 2 months later, he gets sentenced to 20 years in Shawshank for Dorsey's murder.
That's our classic call. Shawshank.
In January of 1960, 19 months later, they find the body of a boy, but it's not Edward. And then the news reports jump to July of 1967. So I have a question for you guys about this. This is 9 years later. Macklin commits suicide. He leaves a note saying, "I saw Eddie last night. He was dead." And I wanted to unpack this with you guys because at first I was like, oh, this is it, fucking with him. He's like tying up loose ends. But then I realized, wait, did it say 9 years later? So some events that I know, because I've read this, happened since then. What do you guys think happened? Was this just a guilty conscience, or was there something else lingering, or is this just Derry on its own?
That it's hard to tell, because if it was 9 years later, it would be out of the cycle. But it's definitely said in such a way to make you go, oh yeah, it was the clown. But it could just, I'm not sure that it entirely matters the difference,
Yeah. It was just interesting.
Yeah, I hadn't even thought of it that way. Well, because the other thing I think is we've never seen it appear or be able to affect adults. So could it have even been it?
I think it was.
Well,
a
it does
guilty
affect
conscience.
adults because
we
it
find out later.
influences- Well, we speculated that it influenced the Adrian murder.
I think it was a guilty conscience because it goes to length that he found religion and was so that he could repent. And I think that all that guilt made him take his own life, and I think that was all him.
Yeah, I lean that way too, but only because it's just out of the cycle.
And no one missed him because fuck you. At the end of these newspaper reports, when I realized that this has been 9 years, I felt really sad because I was like, okay, so we never find out what happened to Edward. We assume he's a victim of it, but we don't know for sure. And then boom, we are with Edward the night that he died. Wow.
This is the first, I might have said this last episode, but this is the first point in the book that I was like, oh yeah, this book's incredibly scary.
Very, very scary.
I've been listening to this audiobook at work. I work third shift in the middle of the night by myself. It is a nightmare.
the police speculate that he ran away because of his abusive stepfather and he had bad grades, and that being those pieces of evidence saying he didn't come home and that's why. And that turns out to be partially true. He stayed out because he didn't want to go home and face that.
And he didn't run away. He just would stay out sometimes, like stay somewhere else overnight.
Yeah. And he goes to Bassey Park, and it's dark, and he goes and he sits by the bridge, and he's just kind of thinking about stuff.
The inner life they give this kid that we know for 5 pages is so intricate, and like you really feel for this kid, which makes the very sudden turn in the scene that much more jarring.
Yeah. Because
he's like imagining killing his stepdad.
For what he did for killing his brother.
For killing his brother, because he thinks, he in his head, he says, he doesn't know what happens, but he knows what happens. And he's having this like daydream about killing his stepdad. And you can feel, once again, in the performance of the audiobook, you can feel his just like joy at it. It's just like such a weirdly sweet daydream that he's having.
It's a revenge fantasy. They always feel amazing.
Yeah, it's great. And then it is very suddenly ended.
Yes, he feels something grab his foot. He looks down, and it's Dorsey with his skull caved in, and he's decayed, and Dorsey's trying to drag him down off the bridge, but he manages to pull free, crawl away, and he's trying to get out of the park now. And as he's running, he now hears something else behind him, something that's making an even louder sound. And when he finally risks a chance to look back, it's the creature from the Black Lagoon. And he's even more terrified, and he just keeps thinking, I'm going to run to the streetlight. If I can make it to the light, everything will be all right. Out of sight. What a fright. For some reason, he goes into a large rhyming scheme there, and I thought it was hilarious.
Real good King writing.
Yeah.
I thought you were making that up because I didn't remember it.
No,
It's not a bit. Okay.
He starts, it does that thing that King does really well when people are starting to lose their mind because something so fucking scary is happening that they just start gibbering.
Yeah.
And he does that. The fact that they're all rhyming is annoying.
It's hilarious.
You know what really fucked me up, though? So he trips and falls over a park bench that had been overturned, and the creature catches up to him, and it's got him, and it's killing him, like, really brutally, and it's disgusting. You're getting this amazing description of it.
Yeah, it's just tearing his throat open with its bare claws.
And he dies trying to reach around to find the zipper because what he's seeing cannot be real.
That fucked me up real hard.
Yes, this is my first of a few notes about really fucked me up. But now, finally, we get to meet Mike Hanlon as a kid, and he is going to stumble across Edward's murder scene without knowing it. I mean, he finds some alarming things, but he's just a kid, and initially he's freaked out, but it's making him think of something else, something scary that happened to him last spring.
This is something that it does extremely well, that something like Dreamcatcher did not, where we are in the past in a story that is going to go to another story where he's going to remember another story, and then we're going to catch back up to the story. I didn't lose the stream one time.
It is masterfully paced. That is another thing, is the structure is so consistent, because every chapter begins with one of our characters arriving in Derry in the present, and then flashing back to their childhood, and then further flashing back into their encounter with it. And it should be it should be like jarring maybe, but the way it is so, unlike in Dreamcatcher, where it just jumped around with no rhyme or reason, this, because it sets up the ABC, it's really easy to follow, and you're never left for very long without an it sighting.
Yeah, it keeps up the pace, even though you're switching from a character about to launch into something interesting. And at first you're like, oh, dang it, but I want to stay here and know. And then within like a minute, you have forgotten about that and you're fully invested in what's happening now. It's the most like satisfying and infuriating writing technique. So we get to know Mike and his family. They have a farm and they seem like just this really kick-ass cool family. They're very close. And one day he comes home after school to a note from his dad that says, no chores today. Go ahead and go outside, play, do something fun. Maybe go explore, pick up a souvenir, but don't go near the cellar hold because it's dangerous there. So, of course, Mike is going to go to the Kitchener Ironworks site and look down into the cellar hold.
Yeah, duh.
So what do you guys think about this scene of him on this exploration?
First, I want to say I just love the relationship between Mike and his dad.
We get a lot more of that later, too.
Yeah. I love that how it sets up Mike's love of town history.
Yes.
Yeah.
It is from his dad sending him on these little scavenger hunts, basically, and leading him to these very unsavory areas of the town, but for the express purpose of like teaching him kind of the nature of Derry.
He's giving him lessons that even though he doesn't fully understand what it is yet, when he gets older, he's going to be like, oh, I
have the
now.
scene with the tramp chair.
Yeah.
Because his dad takes him to the local police station where they have this old room with a torture chair that they used to strap homeless people and drifters to make sure that people didn't come through Derry. And as they're leaving, like this cop is like bragging about it, basically. And Mike turns to his dad and says, you don't like that guy very much. And his dad, very matter of fact, says, no.
Nope.
So yeah, he's teaching Mike being kind and being a good person in this bad town.
Being careful.
Mm-hmm.
Which is also something that comes back because when all is said and done after this trip, his dad's like, I don't know why during all these child killings, I told you to do that. That was dumb of me. Let's pause this for right now.
Anyway, he goes to the Kitchener Ironworks, and because he's a kid and like, even when you're scared, you have to test yourself. He looks down into the cellar and is immediately stunned at what he sees there.
It's written so simply. He looks down and a giant bird is looking up. And you're like, what the fuck? Because earlier he mentions that there's the smokestack from the ironworks. He looks down it and he says, before going to this point, he says, oh, this reminds me of the tunnel that those people were drilling that woke Rodan up in this movie we just watched.
Yeah, because Rodan came out around this time.
Yeah. And then Rodan is in this hole.
Well, here's my question, actually, because it's not Rodan. It's just a big bird.
Well, yeah.
My question is, why the fuck isn't it just Rodan?
Because everything that Pennywise turns into is still a little Pennywise.
Well, and it
is, except he's still turning into, throughout the rest of the series, straight up universal monsters. He turns into the Gill Man. He turns into a werewolf later. Spoiler. So, like, he's turning into, like, I half expected him to turn into Frankenstein. And I love that this is based on Mike's fear of seeing the movie Rodan. I would love... Why isn't it just Rodan flying out of the hole? That would be amazing.
I think it's because this is related to his father's story that we get later, because his father saw something in the 30s.
Oh.
When the black spot burns down, it's like the KKK people.
Right. I do remember that part.
He sees a bird and it's like got balloons like floating. So I think this is like Rodan slash what his dad saw. It's a generational
I totally
thing.
remember that.
No, it's okay.
When I read it.
I love your point, and I thought that too until I got to that, and it's like, oh, his dad saw the same bird. And okay, guys, if the things we see in horror movies are used against us by it, as Ben, you just posited, if I encountered him, I wouldn't be scared because I would be delighted because I would see super sexy, vamped out Brad Pitt and Tom Cruise making out with each other. So I guess Pennywise would never get me because I'm too horny for terror.
No, I know exactly.
Horny for terror.
I know exactly what it would turn into for you. Somebody shaving themselves
Oh my God.
with a straight razor.
I was going to ask because this is such a thing that, of course, would kids be afraid of in the 50s? The things that they were, afraid of back then that they were watching. So I wanted to ask you guys what your it would be, and that's a good answer.
Is it?
Either that or what your power to fight it would be. We'll get to that, though.
Awkwardness.
You just steer all the way in.
Yep. Okay, sorry. Let's continue because this
Yeah.
is a cool scene, a cool showdown between Mike and maybe Rodan.
He flees back into the smokestack because his theory being it's a large bird, it can't get to him. And then he's like, oh, fuck, it's feathers. It can squeeze.
Leading to a very intense scene with a very funny line that I almost texted you guys. He can squeeze. Why did I forget he can squeeze?
I wish you had texted us that.
It's so great. Something that the book does when watching the movies or the miniseries, you kind of forget. And one of the biggest criticisms of the adaptations is that in those adaptations, it gets really close and then just vanishes instead of killing them for no reason.
Mm-hmm.
And this scene and the rest of the interactions with NBC show this is why they get away. There is a reason. It's not the just magic, I'm vanishing away like the adaptations do. And I realized what a disservice that does to the adaptations.
That's such an important part of who these characters are.
Because Mike is grabbing tiles and he's just whipping them at the bird, trying to get it to go away. And he's hitting him, but it's not really doing anything. And then he grabs this one and he just feels like something is giving his arm just an extra bit of push. And he throws it and the tile goes right into its goddamn eye. And it screams.
Which is when I think we see that its tongue is silver with orange pom-poms on
Yeah!
it.
And that's what makes it retreat out of there, is that tearing out his eye, basically.
Not the only weird tongue we're going to get in this episode. And that is not as sexy as it might sound. So Mike comes out of his remembering and he starts to realize that what he's looking at might have something to do with the missing kid that he's just heard about. He has a super freaky moment and then he hauls ass back home. And now we are going to step away from Mike for a moment while we return to the Barrens with, well, first of all, like you said, Ben, an adult Eddie is kind of setting up his own story. He's driving back to Derry and he's reminiscing about what happened that day in the Barrens. So he, Bill, and Ben are down there and we see Ben as like fully his glorious self while he's explaining to Bill and Eddie how they're going to build a dam that could flood the whole Barrens if they wanted to.
Which they do, and they do.
And during this part, I thought it was really cool. We get a line about everything being on track and on the beam.
Yeah.
Which is meaningless unless you're familiar with some other King work, specifically the Dark Tower series.
I think it's pretty fair to say, our listeners.
I assume they do, in case you're new. So they build their dam and they're relaxing and enjoying their handiwork. And Richie and Stanley show up.
I love the introduction to Richie as a kid because he's like, he wanted to be a ventriloquist, but he was bad at ventriloquism and all his voices were bad.
Yes.
And my note says, Richie is the used car salesman of kids.
When I read Richie, it is so painful because there's a kid I went to school with who was this. But it was just all bits all the time. And great guy, but it is tiring. And in this book, it gets a little tiring.
Yes.
He's described as being exhaustingly charming. And we also learn that Stanley is Turkish.
Important news.
That
I
shit
thought
was
that was
great.
amazing.
We get this heartwarming scene of the dam building, them all coming together. Then really takes a turn because Bill gets real quiet. And Bill, everyone acknowledges that Bill is their leader. And so if Bill's getting quiet, everyone else gets quiet. And he decides to open up about the incident with the photo album and tell them everything.
It's really cool too because we've kind of gotten it throughout, and I don't know if we really pointed it out in the first episode, but all of the characters they each have like these weird connections with each other, these moments where they feel like they're part of something or they're being drawn together. And I liked this part that Eddie was noticing Bill and like desperately thinking, please don't. Like he's going to say something. It's going to change everything. Our lives are going on a different trajectory if Bill opens his mouth. Which, again, like we're about to get, ooh, what's Bill going to say? And we cut away because Eddie is thinking about something that happened to him when he encountered this homeless guy one Saturday.
This whole segment is burned in my memory.
Yep.
This and then leading into the It encounter. So Eddie one day was passing the house on Niebolt Street, who, if you have read this book before or are reading it for the first time now, be prepared for the house on Niebolt Street to permanently be seared in your fear center. He's passing a house on Niebolt Street when a man with a rotting nose approaches him and offers to blow him in the street.
For increasingly less amounts of money.
He starts off at a dime.
To be fair, a syphilitic chasing after a child yelling about blowjobs is a very scary scene.
It's horrifying.
And it's terrible. And this story leads into what Eddie's It encounter becomes.
Because after that incident, just 6 weeks after, he's like, I'm going to go back to that house.
Why?
I bet that guy's gone.
Our characters keep going to the house on Niebolt Street.
Stop going there.
Just burn it down. But he crawls under the porch and he sees the sights and smells of all of the transients who've come through because the house on Niebolt Street's not far from a railroad, so people hop on and hop off around this time, and that's the nearest place. They hunker down, that kind of thing.
And it's important to note that Niebolt Street is like the derelict section of town. The railroad closed down, and now all of the houses on Niebolt Street are basically empty.
Yeah. And Eddie just pretends to be a hobo. Like, that's such a natural kid thing to do, I think, to kind of glamorize that lifestyle a bit because you don't really understand it, and he's kind of having a good time pretending to be one of these people. And he looks into the basement window that's under this porch, and then a face pops up on the other end.
The suddenness, he even says, I believe, the suddenness of it and the yet the somehow expectedness of it makes it so he can't even scream. And this face in the window introduces himself as Bob Gray. The nose is rotten off. His face is like a festering hole. And he begins to climb out the window.
So violently. Not just climbing through the open space. He burst the frame out.
His forehead, which is a bare patch of skull covered in a yellow mucus, presses up against the middle wood part and just snaps it with his face.
Do you guys want to know what undercuts the terror, though?
Tell me.
Oh, the way that...
Well, his tongue rolls out, and it's like described as, like a cartoon tongue, like super long. But then he continues to talk, and the guy doesn't do it, but I'm imagining he'd be like, which would not be scary.
But he does undercut it by the thing that he says as he's like slowly, terrifyingly lurching toward Eddie, is he just keeps repeating, blowjob in this hilarious voice.
I'm gonna try that later and see what Devin thinks. We cut back to, well, he gets away, thankfully, but we cut back to the Barrens, and I love this part because he's saying, he saw this guy with leprosy, and Richie and Bill are like, it's syphilis, it's not leprosy. And so Richie's explaining syphilis to Eddie, and Eddie's like, okay, but what's the difference between that and leprosy? And Richie's like, you don't get leprosy from fucking. And you know what fucking is, don't you, Eds? And he doesn't, but he wisely says yes. And then he's thinking about this kid in school. And I'm sorry to take a detour, but it's leading to a very important question. And this kid is like telling him, filling him in on what sex is, which is when you rub your boner against a girl's stomach and then you unload in her belly button and she gets pregnant.
Yep.
And even the kid telling him this seems confused by why a girl would like that. And of course she would not. But what we need to do very briefly to show our camaraderie with Eddie is go around and share what one of our erroneous childhood beliefs about procreation was.
Look.
Oh God, that got so serious. This is what wasn't my intent.
It took me and my wife 2 years to get pregnant.
Were you...
Oh, no. Moving on.
I was not sure, and then I find out I was doing it wrong the whole time.
Do you want to hear mine?
Yes.
I didn't know what a penis looked like, so I imagined in my head what it might be. And it wasn't until I saw the movie Goonies as a young lass, and I'd never had a boyfriend, I was pretty young, that scene where they break the penis off the David statue and they're trying to glue it back together so their mom won't be upset, that I realized I had gotten something extremely wrong. And it blew my mind, and I couldn't understand why the way I had imagined the setup of your guys' situation wasn't the way it actually is. Because I thought that the ball sack was on top. So Goonies taught me a thing.
God, Manscaped picked the right podcast.
Okay.
Derry Public Radio says the balls are on top.
I'm trying to think of, Ben, do you have one? An erroneous
Balls?
Do you have one?
Do you have one?
Do you have one?
I hope you have two.
Oh.
Do I have an erroneous? I still haven't figured it out.
God, okay, this is actually embarrassing. I was a bit of a comedian as a kid, and I recall going up to my aunt when we moved here. She was in high school when I was like 5, and she would like babysit me. And I was like, I got a joke for you. And she goes, what? And I was like, you know why you're from China? And she goes, why? And I was like, because you have one. I thought it was called a China.
There's so many things.
I can't even begin to unpack this, Josh.
This memory is awkwardly burned into my life forever.
Was that your first joke?
No.
Oh my God.
No. But after that moment, I knew I had a career in comedy.
Jesus
But
Christ.
because she did laugh hysterically for a real long time, to the point where I was like, oh, she thought my joke is funny. Oh, something else is funny.
Yeah.
And then she's
screwed it up.
laughing and crying, and I'm like,
And then
oh,
telling
now
your
I
whole
did
family.
something.
She's crying. He's stupid. Oh no.
And then she told my mom, but she couldn't tell her because she was laughing too hard trying to explain it.
I'm having some Christmas ideas. Okay, so sorry. Back to the story. We're back in the Barrens with Bill and part of the gang, and he just finished telling what happened with the book. And so now they all share what happened to them, except for Richie, who hasn't really had an encounter yet, and Stanley, who says he hasn't had an encounter yet, but it's clear that something has happened to him and he's not ready to talk about it. But we're going to spend some time with Richie and Bill because the two of them are going to have a couple of encounters. But once again, before we learn what actually happens, we're going to cut to an adult Richie who is reminiscing about when Mr. Nell caught them with their dam, which I just want to talk about for a minute because his character is so great.
Mr. Nell, the stereotype Irish cop.
I love him.
Yeah, he is just like a very charming character because he finds the kids. They've successfully constructed their dam and literally flooded a huge amount of the barrens. They've put so much work. They even went to the dump and brought back like tires and a car door and built this really elaborate dam. And Mr. Nell finds them and is like, Jesus Christ, and tells them like, you can't do this. You know what this water is, right? And tells them basically they've been playing in pea water the entire morning. But then he just says that, I was sent down here to see if a tree blew over a stream. And that's what I found. And there were some boys down here that helped me clear it out. Isn't that nice? And it's just a really nice interaction where you can tell that he's just a good guy.
Because it's these are good kids, and they're like in trouble, and they know they're in trouble, and they're expecting what you would expect from most Derry adults. And he's nice to them. And like they're even like Ben is crying because it's supposed to be like his moment and this wonderful thing that he just knew and did. It's the thing he is good at, and they're all getting in trouble for it. And their friendship is further solidified because Ben admits, he like takes the blame. He's like, it's my dam, I did it. And then they all step forward. They're like, well, it was our idea. He just showed us how. We were already trying to do it. We all helped out. It was all of us. And Mr. Nell also warns them, you guys shouldn't be playing down here. It's not safe. But I know you're going to anyway, and I'm not going to stop you, but I am going to tell you never be down here alone. Always come in a gang, and don't play any games like hide and seek where you are going to be splitting off. Stay together the entire time. And he's also like, Ben, that's a damn fine dam, and you should not be ashamed. You are going to be great someday. And he also tolerates Richie's impression of him. He's like, you need to work on that. You sound like an idiot. But he's just charming. So we cut to Bill and Richie walking home later that day. This is heartbreaking. Bill opens up to Richie about Georgie in a way that Bill just needed to get this out and tell somebody. And it is beautifully written. Once again, king in grief. It's just so perfect.
The idea that they know this, monster. They're all accepting that these things are happening. And Bill even says, I'm sure what happened to our friends happened to them, and there is that monster. But what happened to me isn't that. Georgie did that to me because Georgie is mad at me. I killed him. I sent him out with that boat, and he's mad at me.
And he starts crying and saying, I didn't want him to die. And Richie's like, I know. I'd be a wreck if my brother died. And Bill's like, really?
So matter-of-factly, Richie is like, in a very Richie way, but still is just like, you're being ridiculous. Like
you can cry.
You just wanted the kid to go have fun. This isn't your fault. It's very cathartic scene.
You know what this tells us, which is even more tragic? His parents never had any like remotely similar conversation with him. Have never talked to him about Georgie's death, because that's a conversation you have with a kid. Like, what are you feeling? And hopefully they would be able to tell you that they feel guilty, like they feel like they caused it, and you could address that.
It is crazy how little of, we don't get a lot of any of their parents because it's not about that, but it's specifically crazy how little we get of Bill's parents.
Yeah. So Richie is seeing a connection between all of their stories, including Bill's. And so he's like, all right, man, show me the picture. Let's do this. And so they go to Bill's and he shows him. Not what I expected.
No.
The first time I read it.
Because the picture of Georgie isn't there anymore. The last picture is just a picture of old Derry that they are in, and then it starts to move. Very fucking creepy.
And then Pennywise pops up, and Bill reaches for his picture self to
there's a hypnosis that happens when it is around.
Yeah.
Because all the kids, all the people that he confronts are like frozen on the spot. And even like Georgie and a few of the other ones are drawn to him.
Oh, shit. It's like a vampire.
Yeah. So he is like drawn to reach toward this obviously bad idea moving picture, and it sucks the tips of his fingers in, his first three fingers, and cuts a lattice of cuts Which is even worse because he says that he would later note that it neatly clipped the fingernail of his pinky.
Mhm.
So did it cut his fingernails up?
Ben.
It's bad. I don't like it.
It is bad.
Thankfully, Richie is there to be like, "You're an idiot," and grab his arm and pull it away. But they throw the photo album across the room and it closes, and then it flies back open to that photo again. And Bill looks at it and it's all normal now.
Which, of course, they go, "Man, that was scary. Let's never bother with it again." And let's definitely never go to the hauntedest house in the entire world.
Ooh, yeah, they're going to make that choice in a little bit. But first, we're going to connect with Richie and Ben and Beverly because it's Saturday morning and there's a creature double feature playing at the Aladdin Theater. And Richie really wants to go, but he doesn't have any money. He spent all his allowance. But he has a plan to fix that. And we get this like goofy, cute exchange. His parents are borderline insufferable, but I love them.
I love this part because the writing makes it so clear that this is Richie's fucking dad.
Yeah.
He is such a dork as well, and he keeps like making aside jokes while Richie is trying to get money from him. He's like, "Hey, Richie, why do you want money?" And Richie says, "Well," and he's, "What's the joke? It's a deep subject for someone with such a shallow mind." And immediately I was like, "Oh yeah, this is totally Richie's fucking dad."
So they strike up a deal where Richie has to mow the whole lawn, and they have the biggest lawn on the block, and he's going to make $2 for it. So having made his $2, he calls all of his friends, goes down the list, but nobody's available to go to the movies, and he doesn't want to go alone. So then he remembers Ben Hanscom. And this was so sweet. He looks him up in the phone book and he gives him a call. And Ben, like, you can tell Ben has never been asked to do anything before. And Richie realizes he's lonely. And then the narration's like, made him feel quite heroic. So on his way to the theater to meet Ben, he runs into Beverly and kind of get not first love like with Ben and Beverly, but he's noticing she's one of the guys, but different.
He notices she's not entirely unpleasant as a lady.
Yeah, this is a very realistic like awakening where he's just like, "Oh wait, girls." Like it seems very, very innocent.
Yeah.
But yeah, very sweet.
The only thing I didn't like about it is that she has a bruise on her face from her fucking dad. And it is described as Richie, because there's a bruise on her face from a man hitting her, realizing because of the contrast of that bruise, she is beautiful, not just pretty. It's like, oh yeah, when you hit a woman, she looks fine.
Ugh. Yeah, that's not great.
Yeah. So we get more of these sweet first love moments between Ben and Beverly, though. Well, just Ben. It's kind of one-sided. You guys have had that, right? Like that moment sitting in the dark theater with that person, and you're not even watching the movie.
100%.
You're just
You're
only
like,
aware of what they're
trying
doing.
not to breathe weird.
Yes. Trying not to sweat.
Yeah. No, of course. I think everyone in the world has had that experience.
The try not to breathe weird is so 100% something I thought too much about next to someone on a date.
Absolutely.
Mine was how to eat popcorn next to them. The only sucky part about this is that Henry and his buddies are at the theater too. They spot the three, and we have a confrontation outside of the theater as everybody is leaving. This fight rocks, though.
It's so good.
It's a weird action movie set piece.
Yes.
Because like they charge, they're in this alley and Bowers and his people are at one end and Bev, Ben, and Richie are trapped in the alley, and Henry does what Henry does and he charges and he gets tripped because that's what Henry Bowers does. But then Richie grabs a trash can lid and uses it to block a punch. And like it is madness, but they are slippery enough and wily enough that they manage to get around all of them and get out of the alley and make a break for it.
And Ben afterwards, because Beverly got yanked by the hair and slammed into a wall, asks her if he hurt her hair. And I only mention it because in this moment, she thinks, oh, I think what I suspected is probably true. Ben wrote the postcards, like, oh, because later she'll remember Bill having written it, not Ben. So that's kind of sad. So these three are hanging out. They go down to the Barrens, where they shortly meet up with Bill and Stanley. And some other guy who doesn't matter.
Yeah. This is the
and that's
where
their
we really
thoughts,
get,
not ours.
Yeah, no, we really get what you were talking about earlier, CM, where they see this other kid and they're like, yeah, he's fine or whatever. He would come around and maybe he would come again to hang out, but he's not one of us.
Yeah, which is just cool. It's a cool thing. And we get snippets of our main characters also recognizing that they're all being brought together by some force. And they don't quite articulate that, but they are supposed to be. And that's really cool. And then we also see Beverly noticing Bill, and Ben noticing Beverly notice Bill, and Richie noticing Ben noticing Beverly noticing Bill. It's all
and also
very
Eddie's
great.
there.
And now we are going to cut to Bill and Richie's next adventure about a week after, so they hang out in the Barrens. About a week after the movie, Richie wants to go check out Eddie's leper, and he convinces Bill to go with. He's like, hey man, you made me look at a book. Now let's go look at a porch. So let's talk about how they each choose the very different ways of preparing for this adventure and what they decide they need to bring along with them.
Bill's the most reasonable person.
That's terrifying, though.
Because, and this is what I love about the quick turnaround with Bill, because we just had the breakdown of Georgie was doing this to me because he's mad at me. And now he's thinking, whatever this is, it killed Georgie and all these kids, so I'm going to kill it. So I've got my dad's gun. And he just pulls this gun out of his basket.
And it doesn't have a safety on it.
No safety because it's a revolver. And he's got it's not loaded, but he's got the bullets also. And Richie's like, well, I've got sneezing powder. I've got this thing.
This scene is the reason in my first read through of the book, Richie was my favorite character because he brings us sneezing powder and it ends up being one of the things that he uses to be the first of our the Losers Club to actually fight back and hurt it.
Well, the first that we
really
see, because Stanley kind of has his own version of sneezing powder.
Right. So yeah, the first one that we see in the book. They get there and they have their weapons of various quality, and they decide to go down into the cellar. They climb down through the window that Eddie had seen the leper. And they get down there, and immediately you can just sense how fucking out of their minds scared they are, because they jump at just a coal bin.
Yeah.
There's a coal bin. They're like, nah. Oh, it's an unmoving coal bin. We're cool. And they're not even down there for very long when they hear noises coming down the stairs. What did you guys think of the speed that the horror segments come on in this book?
That's what makes it so alarming, because it's effective, because normally you have this slow buildup of tension that helps make it terrifying. But in this great book, it just hits
could
and
happen
it hits hard
at any time.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
you're not ever safe, and that's the tension.
So as this noise is coming down the stairs, it sounds like snarling, and they come down, and it has boots and jeans, and then it's just a fucking werewolf wearing the school colors of Derry High.
Yeah, he's got a Derry Tigers Letterman jacket
with Richie's name on it.
It's a teenage werewolf. Rad.
Immediately they're like, oh fuck, we got to get out of here. And Bill is trying to get Richie's attention because Richie is just frozen with terror. And they're trying to climb up the coal to the window at the top of this coal stack. And
Bill is firing off gunshots in this very enclosed space. And I love how true it is. Like, pulls the trigger and no one is prepared for how loud it is. And the bullets barely phase the werewolf. Like, it takes a chunk of its like fur off, and it's still coming after him, and they're scrambling up, and Richie finally gets all the way to the top, and Bill's climbing up, and he's just short of grabbing his hand, and then he can see the werewolf hand grab Bill by the ankle and start to pull him down. It's just so goddamn intense. It's awesome.
This kind of made me understand what happened with Mike a little better, because Richie, out of nowhere, like he doesn't intend to do it, but Mr. Nell's voice or something similar to that comes out of him. And so he's doing the voice at the werewolf, and he's using the sneezing powder. He's just being very Richie. And that's actually what causes, like, the wolf seems afraid, and it kind of backs off, and it allows him to escape. And I realized, I was like, well, what was the deal with Mike? Because he was there to get a souvenir. His dad told him to get a souvenir out of the rubble. And so that thing that he picked up, that was like representing the souvenir, I guess. Sorry if you guys already got that, and I'm late to the game.
No, I hadn't even thought of that. Yeah, that makes sense, because I just assumed it was Mike believing in himself harder. I don't know.
Tile could hurt it, but a bullet couldn't. Like, what's significant about the tile versus the bullet?
Yeah, the only thing that what I kind of think is that it is weak against believing that you can hurt it.
Yeah. Well, I would think Bill would believe the gun would work, though. I think it has to be a little more than that.
Well, except that I mean, this is a werewolf from the horror movie, and what do you see in horror movies? The monster shrugging off bullets.
Yeah.
So I think the reason that this voice works and the sneezing powder works is because Richie has full childish belief
that he can do a voice,
that he can do this voice, and that sneezing powder is debilitating.
You know, it's like mace.
It is.
If someone's trying to kill you, because I often think about someone trying to murder me,
Yep.
And they had a sneezing fit, you could probably get away.
Yeah.
Or like hurt him.
It makes sense.
Yeah. Unfortunately, though, this doesn't stop the werewolf for very long. So he and Bill get on Silver, and we've been getting throughout that Silver, you really have to work it up to its full speed. Once it's at full speed, you might die. It is super fast. But to get there, it is tough and a slow go. And so this whole time, we get this agonizing, excruciating, tense scene of Bill pedaling, Richie hanging on to him, and they can hear it chasing them.
When they whip around the side of the house and run into the street, there's this point where narrating Richie says, you know, like, they have to be free of it because they're on the street now, but he knows it's not. He can just sense it right behind him. And it is so goddamn scary, guys.
The fact that I forgot that the werewolf makes contact. So the first, he slashes into his coat, and luckily his jacket rips off him before it pulls him off the bike. And then it takes another swipe because Richie turns back to look, and it slices his forehead, just a thin line. And they see an intersection up ahead. Like, if we just make it to the intersection, that's all we need to do. And they take a spill off the bike. And when they look back, there's nothing there. However, there is a large sewer drain right there. I wonder where it went.
So we leave this adventure with Bill and Richie, and we cut to an adult Beverly on a plane, giggling like a loon. And here we find out that she escaped Tom to her friend Kay, who's a badass bitch. And Kay helped her. She got her cleaned up, gave her some stuff. Bev didn't have any money. She gave her $1,000 so she could get to Derry. And super, super feeling Norman Daniels vibes here when it comes to Kay's future well-being.
I couldn't help but feel the same way. She gave me such strong... the director, whatever.
I think Annie.
That sounds right. Vibes where there's just I can see. I do not remember this scene if it happens, but I think there's a good chance Tom's coming.
I didn't know if I was remembering Rose Matter or if this does happen. So anyway, we go from this to Kid Bev and her first it encounter. She's in her bathroom getting ready for bed when she hears a voice whisper to her from the drain in the bathroom sink.
casual whispering, "Help me, Beverly," that when you're washing your face and you hear that coming up from the pipes. No big deal. Not scary at all.
This, for real, scared the bejesus out of me reading it the first time.
Yeah.
I don't like drains. I don't like sewers specifically because of this book.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And the idea of hearing these children's voices echoing.
The missing kids.
And yeah, and it's even worse when she says, she recognizes some of these voices.
So she understandably lets out a scream, and her dad is very irritated by this because he was watching TV or something. And so he gets up and blood is just coming out of the drain, and it's horrible and it's everywhere.
Erupting, hitting the bare light bulb and cooking there.
Ugh.
And so she runs out of the bathroom and her dad's right there and he's like, "What is wrong with you?" And she's trying to explain, and she, because she thinks he's going to see the blood, which he does not. And so she can't wrap her head around what's going on. She can't think of how to respond because he clearly doesn't see all the blood that she just saw erupt from the drain. And so he, just beats her up a little bit for interrupting him. And
Yeah.
I hate him.
It's such a he slaps her across the face and then
Casually.
punches her in the stomach.
Very casually.
Yeah. And then when she finally comes up to I saw a spider, he's like, "Why didn't you tell me, you stupid idiot? I wouldn't have hit you. Girls are scared of spiders."
He is one of the most vile characters.
Fucking gross.
Ugh, and that's not true at all. He would have hit her. They always say that.
Yeah.
"Oh, well, if you had done this, I wouldn't have done this. So it's your fault, clearly."
Ugh.
But she says when he's a good dad, he's a
Yeah,
great
it
dad.
is
And
the
then just
most
it twists that knife so hard.
Because it's
Yeah,
her
unnerving.
dad and she loves him.
Yeah.
And when someone is abusive to you and then they're nice, those moments, it's like a reprieve and it means so much and you don't want them to go away.
I think the line is something to the effect of, when he's a good dad, her heart could explode from happiness. And just knowing that he has just that level of power is horrifying.
It is really unfortunate he doesn't get eaten or nothing.
Right.
So Bev can't go in the bathroom and she goes to bed and she hears her mom come home. And I'm mentioning this because I do think it's relevant to something that happens in the morning between her and her mom. She hears her parents having sex. And
It is uncomfortable.
the next morning she's making her dad breakfast. And he goes off, and he's a dick during breakfast too. And you can just see how she has to walk on eggshells. And he's telling her to clean the damn house. I clean stuff all day. I don't want to come home to a pigsty. And so when her mom wakes up, they clean the house together. And her mom's telling her, "Hey, finish the windows to make sure there are no streaks." She's like, "Hey, did Dad mention, the spider?" And she's like, "Huh?" She's like, "Yeah, I saw a spider." She goes, "Did you get your dad upset?" Which is horrible. Beverly's like, "No, no, no." And then she asks her a question. I don't want to say it.
I don't want
I
to
don't
say
remember
it.
what the question is.
Does he ever touch you? And it's so terrible.
Oh, I blacked it out.
Oh,
She
you're lucky.
does not. She doesn't even understand.
She's
the
like, "Yeah, all
question.
the time." She's like, "What do you mean?" And then her mom's like, "Never mind. If you have to ask that, if you have to think it or wonder it, take your kid and leave."
Get your situation out of there.
Yeah.
Get your situation out of there.
We know what you mean, Ben.
I thought you were going to say that when talking about the spider, her mom says if you kill a spider, it brings rain, which sets up the end of this book a little bit.
Oh,
Oh my god. That just blew my brain.
Okay, I see why you were focused on that.
Yeah.
And not, okay.
Huh.
Beverly is
No
traumatized,
spoilers.
understandably, by the bathroom, and after finishing her chores, she just has to get out of the house. And this leads up to one of my favorite moments so far in this book. She comes across Richie, Ben, and the other kid who doesn't matter, playing a game, like pick up pennies or something kids did in the 50s. I don't know if that's
Yeah,
what it's
the
called.
hoop and stick, whatever.
Ball in a cup. And she asks if she can join, and they say yes. And then she's winning, and the other kid accuses her of being a cheater, and there's this verbal confrontation between him and Ben, because Ben stands up for her, and he's like threatening Ben, but Ben has tussled with Henry Bowers, so this kid is not going to scare him.
I love that part where he's just like, there's a gleam in his eye of being like, I faced death twice in this book so far. Fuck yourself.
The kid's like,
Yeah,
do you want a fat lip to match the rest of you? And Ben goes, yeah. And so this kid runs off because he's like, you guys are just gang up on me anyway. And he gets to the end of the alley or street they're on, turns around, flips him off, calls Bev's mother a whore, and runs off. And Richie and Ben are like flabbergasted. They're like, we don't understand why he's acting that way. And they don't quite know what to do because Bev is upset. And she opens her mouth because she's just going to tell him, like, it's okay, guys. Like, words don't mean anything. Don't worry about it. But she's feeling everything that happened to her the night before and this morning. And so she screams out, my mom's not a whore. She's a waitress. And I love that Eddie, like, he's like, I don't know what whore means, but something about the comparison was delicious.
The whores, they came from Babylon. That's all he knows.
It's the Bible. So Beverly, because she's, reacting to this in a way she wouldn't normally, she realizes she needs to tell someone what's going on so that she can figure out whether or not she's crazy. And before she can start her story, Stan shows up. And Eddie's like, oh, she's not going to tell now because Stan wasn't there when this thing happened. But because they're all supposed to be together, she does. She tells them about the blood in the bathroom. And when she's done, this is, Stan. God, and like I said, remembering Stan, because we know he killed himself as an adult, it just makes it even sadder. He's just the sweetest, kindest kid. He's like...
His end, like the way Stan dies informs so much of his character and what he does and like how he handles it. It's so heartbreaking and so understandable is the terrible part.
Yeah. It's like he's the only one of them, and you get glimpses of this, who truly understands, like, yes, something is bringing us together, and if we allow that to happen, we are putting ourselves possibly in more danger than we are in just being kids in Derry. And he's resistant to that, but he is part of this group, so his resistance is futile. Sorry.
Get out.
So Stan's like, let's just clean it up and we'll wash the rags. I've got some change. And I like how, I can't remember which one, but they're like, well, blood doesn't come out easy. And I think it's Ben is like,
yeah, Ben's like, who
well,
cares?
the
It's
adults
invisible.
can't see it. Yeah. So they go to Beverly's house. They painstakingly clean the bathroom. It's very sweet. Beverly's relieved, of course, to know she's not crazy.
My favorite part is when they finish, they take the rags to the laundromat and they just like sit there silently waiting for the laundry to be done. And the lady in the laundromat is like unnerved by these three very silent, serious
That was
children.
great. I love that too. And we get just tons of character development between all of them throughout this, and it's just so good.
Their friendship is so real. It's so heartwarming.
While at the laundromat, Stan finally tells his story about the standpipe.
The standpipe.
The standpipe. Oh, I thought we were all just saying the standpipe.
I said the standpipe.
Oh,
Stan-
I didn't catch it.
Because Stan goes there.
Yeah.
oh, nice.
Wow. That was not
Nice.
worth any of
Keeping it.
We find out that the standpipe used to be open for people could go up and look around, but it's full of like millions of gallons of water. And
which just seems like a terrible idea.
it's so bad. And some kids fell in and drowned. And then some more kids fell in and drowned.
That story reminded me of The Outsider, the story of the cave-in. Because
Yeah.
it is completely unrelated to the main plot, but it is so frightening because they just tell about these kids that fell in and slowly treaded water until they couldn't anymore, just floating in the dark. And it made me more upset than so many of the supernatural things.
Yeah.
Yeah. It also reminded me of the Russian woman from Dreamcatcher.
Yes.
Yeah.
But Stan's there because he's a bird watcher. He loves checking out birds.
But not in like the creepy Back to the Future way.
So he found out that there was a cardinal that was at the bird bath that was by the standpipe. So he brought his book, he brought his binoculars, and he is ready to spend all day sitting out on this park bench trying to find one. And he's not having any luck.
He does find a cowbird.
He does.
Important.
He is walking away, and he notices that the door to the standpipe, which has been locked since that incident, is now open. And he just figures like, well, it's open. I'm a kid. Let's do this. I love that it's part of that hypnotism. He walks in and suddenly realizes he's halfway up the first flight of stairs before he has any idea of what's actually happening. And then he hears these squishy footsteps coming down. The door slams behind him.
Is this where he also hears the sounds of like a circus, like music?
Yes.
Calliope music.
Interesting how he escapes this situation, though.
In what world would that be your recourse?
So, okay,
Well,
what happens is as he's pressing his back against the door, basically it's locked, he can't get out. He turns to his love of bird watching and just starts shouting names of birds into the darkness. And it works.
Because it is unique to him, like the sneezing powder is unique to Richie, and the souvenirs and rubble is unique to Mike.
Which brings me to my question I asked earlier. What's your power against it? Because the only thing I could think of similar to bird watching is I could probably just yell the original 150 Pokemon at it.
Oh my god, that's amazing.
Right?
I think I would recite monologues that I had memorized, like, because I've auditioned a million. I have a book full of every monologue I've ever memorized.
Oh, wow.
So I would probably, that'd be mine, is reciting monologues.
Okay, 2 things that happen when I watch scary movies is if it's about ghosts, I think you just need to punch that ghost in the face. Don't even mess around. Yep. And if it's about like slashers, I just think you need to gouge their eyes out. Just go for the eyes. Just gouge them out. So I would die because I'd be trying to punch it and gouge whatever it is, its eyes out.
Well, if you believed in it enough.
If a ghost ever shows up, I'm gonna punch first, ask questions later. Knock on the door. Otherwise, we'll be polite, you know?
Be a polite ghost.
I wish I hadn't started this line of dialogue.
CM, ghost puncher.
No, it's true. Every time we have to announce ourselves before walking into a room, or CM punches us and calls us a ghost.
Yeah.
No, okay, sorry. When I was a kid, the power went out once, and I happened to be in the basement where my stepbrother and his friends were hanging out at the time, and they were teenagers, and I was a little kid. And one came up to me to see if I was okay, but I got scared because I didn't know he was right there. And I turned around, and I was little, so he's bending down to ask me if I was okay, and I punched him in the eye.
Jesus!
This goes way back,
I like
you guys.
that. That's a good story.
Okay, so we are at the second interlude, and we are back with Mike's journals. It's present day, well, ish, because this is before he makes those phone calls, and there have been more disappearances. He's keeping an eye on things, and he's ruffling some feathers, primarily that of the police chief, and he's still struggling with the gravity of the decision he kind of knows he needs to make, but he's just waiting for, like, he really needs an excuse. So the next part of this book, this is so cool. We're back with Mike's family again. It takes place in the 30s with Mike's dad, and we're going to spend a lot of time with him. Josh, you mentioned earlier, like stepping back and then back and then back, or maybe it was Ben, one of you mentioned how awesome this book does that. This is a really amazing example of that because Mike's dad is telling him a story in 2 time periods. First, when Mike is I think it's a few years after we meet him as a kid, and then it's like 4 or 5 years later because Mike's dad is dying of cancer. And he's wanting him to finish the story that he started to tell him about the black spot and then stopped because he was too young to hear the full story.
Yeah, he would tell him about because he was part of Company E, which was an all-black squadron, because they weren't allowed to fraternize with any other, so they had to be made their own thing. And Mike, he tells Mike about a racist sergeant that made him constantly dig holes, fill holes in, then dig holes again. And just to illustrate how poorly they were treated. But when it comes to the black spot, it's because people from Company E would go into town when they were off and they would drink with the townies, even though it was prohibition. And nobody in the town cared. They had a great time partying with them. Nobody treated them poorly. And then some racist douchebag who runs the town, who is also implied to be a member of the Legion of White Decency.
The North's KKK.
Yeah. Goes to the sergeant and says, hey, we can't have all of these people fraternizing in town. You got to do something. And he's like, well, we can't let them in the NCO club because that's for officers and these are all privates. So nothing we can do about it. So they end up giving them a shed, an old supply shed. And we're not prepared for the fact that these guys would be like, yeah, all right, this is ours. And they clean it up. They put in like a makeshift kitchen. It's still a dirt floor, but they find out that amongst all of them, they can play some instruments. So they have a little band going. Dick Halloran is there.
Yeah.
That's weird. Dick Halloran is the cook.
Should we remind our listeners what Dick Halloran is from?
Dick Halloran from The Shining.
Thank you.
The place, I was going to say the place blows up, but that's not the correct phrasing for how this all
Well,
ends.
because the town people in town who do care are like jealous that they made the best of this spot, and now white people from town are going to hang out there with them because they like them and they like the music and they're bringing booze and stuff, and so it's just
That just sounds like a way
developing-
cooler club.
Yeah, it is, and so it's creating this situation in which like these assholes are just getting more and more upset, and so they decide to do something about it.
Yeah, the Legion of White Decency pile into cars, drive on the base, and some of them walk from around the woods nearby, so they're completely surrounded. It just so happens that the guys who drove on base, though, they drove in the same make and model and color car as that sergeant from earlier. Like, what a weird coincidence, right? So anyway, they light torches, and what I like about Mike's dad is his eternal optimism, because this whole thing is happening, and on his deathbed, he's still saying, to this day, I am sure they were never planning on hurting anybody. I'm sure they were coming here to scare us and send people away. The fact that this turned into
Deadly.
a deadly incident was not their intention.
Yeah,
but-
it's not because we were black. It's because the soil of Derry is wrong. And I thought about this a lot because it's comforting to think that social injustices aren't because people are absolutely the worst, but because of some monster or external force making things happen. Yeah, that's the case in Derry maybe, but not the case in the real world.
Well, one of these guys threw their torch through the window into the kitchen, which started this massive fire. People were trampled trying to get out because the door had to be pulled in to get out. So people were slammed against the door. Thankfully, Dick Halloran was there, and he pulled Will to his feet, got them out a window nearby, but the place turned into an oven, basically, trapping all these people inside. Who was it? One of the guys ended up knocking out, like punching another officer.
It was a sergeant. Wasn't it the same sergeant?
No, it wasn't the same sergeant because
Oh.
he was one of.
Oh, yeah.
He grabbed this guy's truck and drove it into the building to knock down a wall so people could get out, saving hundreds of lives. So I
I
think
think 70 people died.
Yeah. And like over 100 people were injured from being like trampled and squeezed like that.
And this is where we get, like, he kind of leaves off the story because Mike's mom's like, hey, you're kind of pushing it. He's a little too young for this, because he tells him that he sees something. And I think that's partially responsible for why he's attributing this tragedy more to the wrongness of Derry, like some outside or supernatural force. So Mike has to wait like another 4 or 5 years to find out what his dad saw. And what he saw was the bird that Mike saw, or a similar one, like a giant bird with balloons attached to it.
Hearing that his dad saw a bird that was not flying but floating because of those balloons, where he has that realization of, holy shit, I saw that too.
Mm-hmm.
And it just blows his mind in such a cool way. And that's, remembering all this is actually what makes Mike, present day Mike, wake up at his desk where he's been sitting in the library. And that's where the end of this leaves off in a really creepy area.
Well, and it's cool too, because right before this ends, the purpose of his dad telling him this story is through part of this, Mike's like, why did you come back to Derry? Because his dad had left for a while because he's based in Derry, and then he was discharged from the army. He'd gotten injured, and he came back, and they bought a farm, had some trouble with a certain Bowers person who spawned another Bowers person, but he's making a good life for him and his family. And Mike has an idea that his dad came back so that Mike could take part in what ended up happening. Like, his dad was drawn back to Derry for Mike to be part of this group, which I thought was really scary. And then we end with the bloody balloon popping face for Mike, which is like,
It's an anticlimactic way to describe this.
okay, give it a better shot.
Mike wakes up at his desk and he sees that even though he has locked the library, there are muddy footprints that go from the door all the way up to the desk where he was sleeping. And there's no footsteps going back the way they came. And he knows the door was locked. And he looks up and there is a single red balloon tied to his desk. And when the balloon turns around, on the balloon is Mike's face, except for his eyes are removed and his mouth is screaming. And then the balloon bursts.
Basically what I said.
That's it for this episode of Derry Public Radio. As always, thank you for listening. Join us for our next episode where we will be covering chapters 10 through 13. For Benjamin Graham and CM Alexander, I'm Joshua Kahn reminding you, in nightmares, we can think the worst. That's what they're for, I guess.
Hey everyone, CM Alexander here. Thank you for listening to It Part 2. We hope you enjoyed it. Thank you again to our awesome patron, Rachel Jansen, for selecting this book as part of her tiered reward. As you guys know, these episodes of It are sponsored by Manscaped. And I know what you're thinking. CM, what could you possibly have to say about this? You admitted on this episode that you didn't even know where the balls were supposed to be. And while that may be true, I married some balls. So ladies or gentlemen, whether your balls are on your body or in your heart, give your loved one or yourself the gift of Manscaped. I gave mine the Performance Package 4.0, and it came with so many cool things, including the softest boxer briefs I've ever felt, and a really nice toiletry bag. And the best part is, our listeners can get 20% off and free shipping with the code DERRY at manscaped.com. But even better than that, if you're listening to this by November 29th, 2021, you are just in time for the Black Friday Cyber Monday sale, where you can get 25% off statewide, no coupon code needed. You can save our coupon code for another time, but right now get yourself 25% off, and that's at manscaped.com. Your balls will thank you. That's all for now, listeners. Goodbye.